Welcome to my new YouTube video. Today we're going to set up my minimalist, clean and super practical reading journal for 2026 together, so that I'll actually use it all year round. There will be a second part with decorations, but first we'll lay the foundation so that everything fits together. This year I've chosen an 8x8 journal from Tifosi, with a dot grid again. I just love dot grid because it's so flexible. The journal has two dividers and a pocket at the back. It also has a pen holder. Honestly, that's a game changer for me because I always have my pen to hand and more likely to keep track of things. So let's begin. We'll start with the title page. I borrowed a few ideas from last year's reading journal to make it feel like my style. Again, I used an open book as the motif and the font to match my bullet journal. Of course, it says 2026. Then come the dragons, inspired by a book series you're probably familiar with. To stop the whole thing to look too strict, I added some little sprinkles and misty effects to give the cover atmosphere without making it look cluttered. Just a quick note about the setup in case you're wondering why the lighting is so different. I was in Lapland and filmed it using only a small tripod. On my YouTube channel I also uploaded a video taken by my mobile phone where you can see it slowly getting dark outside. A kind of time lapse. I think it's beautiful and somehow very fitting for a reading journal. Overall, the cover remains clean and black and white. I added a few grey shadows with a felt tip pen to give the motif some depth. That's all it needs, simply yet special. Next comes a page that I want to include every year. My favorite quote about reading, from George R.R. Martin. The message is, through reading you can live countless lives, experience countless loves, travel to distant worlds, and see things you would never otherwise see. For me, that is the essence of reading. This page is like a little why at the beginning of the journal. In case you're wondering, there are no washi tape, stickers or large decorative elements here yet. I didn't bring everything with me to Lapland. I also wanted to do the setup in two parts. Part 1 is the minimal setup, focusing on content, structure and tracking. Part 2 will be decorative version, where I embellish everything to give the page more atmosphere. Next up is the rating system. I've carried this over from last year because it worked very well. I'm planning to create a pocket to hold the rating overview. Next is book in 2026. This is my central overview. So I can see at a glance which book I've read, who wrote it, when I started and finished reading it, and what rating I received. It's basically my annual book list, but nicer and clearer. I opted for a Gothic font for the headings. It's more elaborate than my previous fonts, but I think it's perfect for a reading journal. It gives the journal its own character, like old library vibes. This will appear more frequently later in the journal to create a coherent overall picture. I'm also using Dutch doors so that I can see all the books at a glance. There will also be decorations around the edges later, in part 2. For this spread I used 3 pages. Finally, I added a few lines and accents with the grey felt tip pen to make it more interesting. I think this makes it look much livener while maintaining a clean look. Finally, we come to my bookshelf, which is one of my favorite spreads. I used a similar style to last year and drew another Gothic window. This has become something of a signature element for me. I used the same font for a title to make it look uniform. There are lots of shelves on the bookshelf. The idea is to write down all my unread books and color them in over the course of the year. I use 12 different colors, one for each month. This means that at the end of the year I can see at a glance how many books I read each month. It's a bit like a visual statistic board, and I love that kind of thing. I made the Gothic window relatively simply, but using round shapes and deepening them with different pens to create texture. I used grey to add shadow and give it a 3D effect. I'm still thinking about whether to add individual patterns to the white dots later. It's one of those typical I'll do that in the decorative version things. Then we're back to a layout inspired by my bullet journal, Releases 2026. It's essentially a future log, but only for new releases. I note down which books are coming out in which month and on which date. This is especially useful for series that I love and authors that I always want to keep an eye on. Otherwise, I quickly lose track and either buy duplicates or miss releases, neither of which is ideal. While we're on the subject of buying, I've set myself a rule for 2026. I will only buy new books by authors I have read before. If there is an author on my to-be-read pile whose work I have never read, I am not allowed to buy any new books by them until I have read at least one of their books. I love buying books, but otherwise my pile of shame grows and grows. This is my attempt to tame it a little. Of course, I make a mistake here too. I meant to write August, and then I went wrong. Welcome to real journal life. For bigger mistakes, I use the same method as in my bullet journal. This saves pages and nerves, and it looks neat in the end. Next is something I want to try for the first time this year because it has been recommended to me everywhere, a daily reading overview. This is an annual overview in which I can record how many pages I've read each day. This will allow me to see patterns throughout the year, such as when I read a lot, when do I read less, and how does this develop over the year. To save me having to count pages every time, I use a book tracking app. After each reading session, I enter how much I have read and exactly what I have read. Then I transfer that information to my journal, probably not daily, but collectively at the weekend when I do my planner recaps and organize my life. This makes it more realistic and helps me stick with it. And then there's my first big challenge for 2026, reading 126 books. Yes, I know, it's an ambitious goal, but I prefer goals that screams challenge, rather than just I'll give it a try. On this page I have drawn 126 boxes. Each box represents a book that I want to read this year. Below that there are 12 additional boxes, one for each month, each with its own color. This way I can see at a glance how many books I've read each month. The layout is complex because there are a lot of boxes and the numbers have to be in the right place, but I think it's really beautiful. Once the decorations are added, this page will look fantastic. unfortunately, my recording ended at this point, which is why you can see the layout of the last challenge directly within the structure. You'll see it later in the flip through, the A to C challenge. I'm sticking with the Gothic font here too. I simply use the size of my label sticker as a template, then prepare the letter A to C with the goal of printing out the cover every book I read for this challenge and sticking it next to the corresponding letter. By the end of the year, I will have a complete A to C wall of covers. This will be a tracking system and a really nice memory aid. Now let's move on to the layout for January. That's why January is called Chapter 1. It fits perfectly. Below that is the monthly overview. A calendar showing the whole month. I use this to record which book I read and how long it took me. As I usually work on a monthly basis in everyday life, I want to neatly transfer this into the big overviews afterwards. In addition to my monthly overview, there is also a page section. There I track how many pages I have read each day. Then come the book reviews. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to make a video showing exactly how I rate books and the criteria I use. This is important to me because it helps me to remember why I love a book or why I didn't. That brings us to the end of part 1. A simple reading journal set up with no fancy decorations, just the structure and content I need to track 2026 really well. If you want to stay tuned, be sure to follow me so you don't miss part 2. In that one, we'll add decoration and details to turn the minimal setup into a journal you want to live in. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, stay creative. Bye. Bye. Bye.